Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, June 27th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about Rhode Island's 2nd Congressional District and new polls from Boston Globe and Suffolk University that show a Republican leading in this Democrat plus 15 district by 6 percentage points in the November general election. Now, these new numbers come as a surprise to the Democratic Party, largely because this district has never been competitive in over 10 years. In fact, much longer than that. Rhode Island's 2nd District voted for Joe Biden with 57% of the vote to Donald Trump's 43%. The congressional redistricting turned this district into a Democrat plus 17 PVI according to FiveThirtyEight, meaning that it is entirely a safe Democratic seat. But now, that entire idea and belief has been upended by this brand new poll from Boston Globe and Suffolk University. The reason why this poll is so important is because it shows that there is a change in a safe Democratic seat. No one ever really expected Rhode Island's 2nd District to become competitive because, quite frankly, it never made much sense. Looking at the state of Rhode Island, it was supposed to lose an electoral vote, meaning that it would only have one singular House seat, but ultimately ended up remaining with its two, even though its population is not growing to the same level that other states are, and thus they return to their old maps that they were using for the past 10 years. Take a look at the Rhode Island map between 10 years ago, or at least what it was drawn 10 years ago, and what it is now. Not much of a change, only slight portions on the outskirts of Providence, Rhode Island, meaning that these districts remain solid blue. The 2nd district that shows the Republicans ahead by 6 points in this potential matchup show a partisan lean of Democrat plus 17, meaning that in no one's reality would this district have ever become competitive. But as we can see, that is very clearly the case in these new numbers. Now, I'm not one to say that I will blindly follow a singular poll, but it definitely is not a good look. It's very hard to imagine how any sample or any polling company could even find a Republican lead of 6 points in this November general election. Donald Trump received just 43% of the vote. Joe Biden defeated him by 14 points. It doesn't make sense that this is a district that could easily go to the GOP or at all be within a likely margin or likely characterization. It's laughable. It's unbelievable, yet somehow it's possible, according to the Boston Globe. This poll might be completely inaccurate and completely misgauging the context and constituents within this district, but it also could be very accurate. It also could be an individual case where maybe this 2nd district is different than the rest of the districts across the nation. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth because this one Republican, this Alan Fung Republican who is ahead by 6 points, is a strong Republican candidate for a number of reasons, and we'll get into that later on in the video. But the fact remains that in a district that has a partisan lean of Democrat plus 17, it is difficult to have Democrats leading in this poll. In fact, Republicans lead by 6 points across the district, meaning that Democratic districts, as partisan as this one, might end up being as competitive or as pro-Republican, depending on who runs. It tells us that 2022 is certainly not going the way the Democrats would expect, especially in the United States House of Representatives. Because based off of our House map here, based off of the ratings, and based off of the characterizations we have thus far, Republicans are already poised to pick up control of the House. Real Clear Politics already declares that Republicans are at a base 223 seats. 218 are needed for a majority. Democrats are only at 180. This is not a good look for the Democratic Party, not one in the slightest. And to see the Democratic Party in such a vulnerable position means that Democratic districts, such as Rhode Island's 2nd, could be in a very competitive form, despite maybe other people expecting it not to be. The Real Clear Politics House map is clear. The national generic ballot, while narrowing up following the Roe v. Wade decision by 1 point, 2 points, and yet to be seen because we've only had really one poll that has been taken following the Roe v. Wade decision. What we see in the state of Rhode Island in this 2nd district is that the Republican leading contender wins by 6 points across the state, across the district, but practically the state. In the Republican primary here, Alan Fung leads the Republican primary by 52 points. He will be the Republican nominee for Rhode Island's 2nd district unless something massive happens within this Republican primary that changes the trajectory of it. But it is clear that in this general election, numbers look a lot better for the GOP than otherwise expected. So in doing a bit of an, report or investigation into the 2nd District, watch this district right over here that is highlighted. It voted for the Democrat by 16.7% in the 2020 election. 2018, that was a 27-point margin. In 2016, it was a 28-point margin. 2014, it was 25. In 2012, it was 21. This is the same district, in fact, a less Democratic district than what has been drawn to be the new Rhode Island 2nd District. And now somehow a Republican is ahead. Now, Rhode Island on the national level might be viewed as this overwhelmingly Democratic district or state. And arguably speaking, that's right. Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump here by 21 percentage points. These two districts have practically been cracked in half to a point where they're nearly as equally pro-Democratic, even though the Rhode Island's 1st District is slightly more partisan towards the Democrats. In the state of Rhode Island, Donald Trump lost by 21 points. Yet in 2014, the Republican Party nominated Alan Fung to be their nominee for governor. Well, Alan Fung, while only receiving 36% of the vote, came within 4 points of winning the governorship. Now, one could argue that this moderate candidate stood in the way of a Democratic victory in a landslide proportion that you might expect within the state of Rhode Island. And looking at years past, I wouldn't exactly agree. We can talk about 2018, which shows a very good victory for the Democratic Party, but I want us to understand what 2018 was. But we can go back to 2010, when Lincoln Chafee, who did run for president as a Democrat, who was actually a Republican before, then became an independent, then became a Democrat, he ended up running in this governor election and won the governor election with 36% of the vote as an independent. You go back to 2006, it was held by a Republican, but then 2014 comes around. Gina Raimondo wins the Democratic nomination, wins the general election, but it shows that Rhode Island doesn't always vote for Democrats, as you might expect. Democrats got 41% of the vote in 2014, got 23% of the vote in 2010. The point being that ticket splitting and voting for different parties is very possible and has happened within the state of Rhode Island on many occasions. I brought up 2018 because I do recognize the Democrats have had some strong performances in the state. But remember what 2018 was. It was a year that was a Democrat +8 national environment. The Democratic contenders in 2018 in the House elections in Rhode Island were winning by 34 points and 27 points. Yet on the governorship, Gina Raimondo, as the incumbent in a Democratic wave year, only won against Alan Fung by 15.5%. Yes, it is impressive, but it shows that Alan Fung was able to do what many other Republicans were unable to do across the nation in 2018, and that was narrow up the state relative to where it was in 2020 and prior elections and current elections. 2018 was a year the Democrats should have been blowing out the margins in epic proportions, especially in the solid blue states. But Gina Raimondo won by 16 points, which is still very much impressive, but it shows that with this specific Republican and Democrat, this state was more competitive than it should have been in the governorship. It was still very solid, still very secure for the Democratic Party, but 16 points when Biden was winning it by 20 and a 5 points better year for the Republican Party. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? I mean, it says that there wasn't exactly this extreme overperformance, and there's one common denominator here in both of Gina Raimondo's elections, and that is the Republican nominee, Alan Fung. So now he heads over to the Rhode Island 2nd Congressional District election, where he seems to be now in a powerful position. I don't know if this poll is entirely accurate. I still stand by the understanding and idea that Rhode Island's 2nd District will still go blue, because I'm not going to blindly follow one individual poll. Voters across Rhode Island know Alan Fung's name. Why? Because he ran for governor twice and he was the mayor of a pretty substantial town within the state. He's someone who holds name recognition and is dominating in his Republican primary. I have no doubts in my mind that he is at 45%. I think that could make sense. Narrowing down from a Biden plus 14 district to potentially a Democrat plus 10 victory makes sense seeing 2022. Or even maybe a 2010 return, not in the 2nd district, but in the 1st district, where Rhode Island's 1st district went to the Democrat by 6 points. That is something that could happen in the 2nd district. I do not believe that this is an indicator that Republicans will win the 2nd district, more so than it is an indicator that voters aren't immediately clinging to the Democratic Party in districts where it otherwise is very much expected, which could mean later down the line. Given more months to campaign, given more months for things to go wrong with the Biden administration, wrong with Democratic leadership, and then maybe it could become a winnable district. I think Alan Fung's lead here is something that should worry the Democratic Party, but it doesn't mean that they are all of a sudden screwed entirely within the state of Rhode Island or screwed entirely on the national numbers. I have stood by my prediction that the GOP will win control of the House. But the question is by how much? If this poll is correct, if Alan Fung is truly leading in a Biden plus 14 district by 6 points, Democrats aren't even going to hit the 180 that Real Clear Politics might expect them to. They would hover around the 160, 170 range because there are so many districts that fall in that category of a Democrat partisan lean of Democrat plus 17 or a Democratic partisan lean with Biden of plus 14. Anything under that, I mean, you're talking about, potentially speaking, automatic flips and beyond that, because it isn't just a Republican plus 1 lead in Rhode Island's 2nd district, but Republican plus 6. I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that the 2nd district does not have someone with high name recognition on the Democratic side. The most the Democratic candidates are getting for their top contender is a 33% margin, 33% of voters voting for them in the Democratic primary. 33% down to 30% in the June poll tells me that there isn't a clear and consistent frontrunner in the sense that there's someone who's up in the 60-70 range like you see in the Republican primary. Obviously, there is a leader, but it's not the same way as if there was a Democratic incumbent. 2022 was the year and is the year of many Democratic retirements. But the Democrat running here, or Langevin, I believe is how you say the name, is choosing to retire, choosing not to run for re-election. Should they have remained in this position, ran for re-election against Alan Fung, they probably would have been leading in these polls. I think it comes down to name recognition and inability to recognize the Democratic nominee. Alan Fung has name recognition. He ran statewide twice. He's from the 2nd district, and he's dominating in the Republican primary, which tells me voters know his name and they seem to like him on the Republican side, which means he probably has a good amount of outreach to the 2nd district. But by the time we reach November, I have no doubt in my mind, at least right now, that it will not be a 6-point margin of victory for the GOP. It will probably be a Democratic victory, not in the way that Biden won the district. I don't think that makes sense. What I think makes sense is a Democratic victory. This 2nd district is still very partisan, and we can't throw all that away because of one poll from the Boston Globe. It could be a very accurate poll. We could find ourselves in a position where it predicted it months in advance, and they become the new gold standard for the New England area. But then again, we could also be looking at this from the perspective of there hasn't been an established Democratic nominee yet. September 13th, 2022, 2 months from now, more than that, is the primary. There is a lot of time for things to shake up the race within Rhode Island, for things to be established on the Democratic and Republican sides, meaning that voters right now are going to cling with who they know. But of course, there is the flip side. If it is accurate, it's really bad news for the Democratic Party. I don't think Democrats should look at this, though, and start to doom and gloom about their House chances. At the end of the day, if that poll was entirely accurate and it was replicated on the national level, again, they would not even crack 180 seats. Democrats are likely going to hover somewhere in the 190s, potentially low 200s. And that's a good year for the Democratic Party. 2022 automatically shows us that the GOP is going to win back control of the House. All they needed from the last election was just 4 seats. It says 5 here, but the Republicans actually just won a special election in Texas's 34th district, which was Democrat plus 14. It now became Republican plus 8, 9 points, but that's also because there was vote splitting, and by the final margin, I think you're talking about somewhere around a combined margin for the GOP by about 5 points. But redistricting has turned that new district back into a safe district, so it really just depends. At the end of the day, what we see on our House map and what we are going to expect is Republicans to win. I just don't buy it that it's going to be in the level of seeing districts such as Rhode Island's 2nd flip. Even in wave years, Rhode Island's 2nd district never went to the GOP. You go back to the 1990s, and then you take a look around this time period, where in the 2nd district, even then, actually, that's now Senator, but the last time Rhode Island's 2nd district went to the GOP was, 1988? It doesn't make sense that Democrats are going to lose the 2nd district in 2022 simply because of where we are nationally. And especially following the overturning of Roe versus Wade, congressional races are likely going to take a slight turn. Maybe not necessarily in a way that Democrats are going to experience victories that are unexpected or wave type of victories by any means. But what I might say is that races such as this one, which already fall back as extremely Democratic, will likely remain that way. I find it very difficult to believe that this race is a 6-point Republican victory. There's a reason why there are so many undecided voters, and it's not because those undecided voters are Republicans. This is a Democratic district. There are way more registered Democrats in this district than there are Republicans. It's not impossible for the GOP to win. Alan Fung got close in 2014 and is a name that people recognize and some love, but it also doesn't mean that that alone carries him across the finish line in a district that is so heavily partisan. So keep that in mind when you look at polls such as this one. On one hand, it shows Republicans ahead, but look at the undecideds and look at where we are in terms of name recognition and previous candidacies, and it tells you exactly why there might be that narrow 6-point lead, or not narrow, that surprising 6-point lead for the GOP in a Biden plus 14 district. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.